There's a place in the world where, on an ordinary winter's day, spit freezes solid before it hits the snow. Where cars are never turned off, because if the engine cools down, it might never start again. Where kids only get to stay home from school once the thermometer drops past -52 degrees, because up until that point, class carries on as normal. It sounds like the setting of a sci-fi film, or some icy planet in a galaxy far, far away. But it's real. This place has a name, a mayor, a school, a corner shop, and around 500 residents who call this brutal cold home. We are talking about Oymyakon, a tiny village tucked away in the heart of Siberia, Russia, widely considered the coldest permanently inhabited place on the planet. This isn't an isolated research station, nor a temporary military outpost, nor a camp full of scientists who stick around for a few weeks before packing up and heading home. It's a genuine community, with families who were born there, grew up there, and plan on staying put, surrounded by a white landscape that seems to stretch on forever. In this article, we are taking a deep dive into this mysterious, almost forgotten corner of the map, where it is, why it gets so ridiculously cold, what daily life looks like for the locals, which temperature records have been set there, how local culture has adapted to such extremes, and why, despite it all, more and more curious travelers around the world are keen to visit this frozen, remote pocket of the earth. Where is Oymyakon? Oymyakon sits in the Sakha Republic, also known as Yakutia, a massive region in the far northeast of Russia, in Siberia. To put its size into perspective, Yakutia is bigger than entire countries like Argentina, yet its population is tiny and scattered across a territory that stays frozen for most of the year. The village lies on the banks of the Indigika River, a waterway that winds for roughly 1,700 kilometers before emptying into the East Siberian Sea. The area is boxed in by mountain ranges, which, as we'll get into further down, play a huge role in explaining why it's so much colder here than in other places just as close to the Arctic. Getting to Oymyakon is no small feat. There's no airport in the village itself. The most reliable route is to fly into Yakutsk, the regional capital, itself considered the coldest city on Earth, and then face roughly 2 days on the road. Part of that journey runs along the notorious Road of Bones, built during the Stalin era by forced labor prisoners, a route that crosses 3 major mountain ranges through a bleak, silent landscape. So we are talking about one of the most remote, hard-to-reach places on the planet. It's no wonder it captures the imagination of anyone into secret islands, mysterious destinations, and forgotten corners of the map. In a way, Oymyakon is its own kind of island, not cut off by ocean, but by thousands of kilometers of frozen boreal forest. If there were a Guinness World Records category just for cold, Oymyakon would be right up the top. Its most famous record dates back to the 26th of January 1926, when local thermometers are said to have recorded a jaw-dropping -71.2 degrees Celsius. While not every meteorological body treats that figure as fully official, it's widely cited as the lowest temperature ever felt in a permanently inhabited area, and also the lowest ever recorded across the entire Northern Hemisphere. Another key milestone came in 1933, when the village once again smashed cold records, this time with readings considered more reliable by the weather stations of the era. For comparison, the lowest temperature ever recorded anywhere on Earth was in Antarctica, at nearly -91 degrees, but nobody lives there permanently, just scientists rotating through temporary bases. That's exactly what makes Oymyakon so special. It's not the coldest spot on the planet full stop, but it is the coldest spot where ordinary people genuinely build their lives. Beyond those historic records, an average Oymyakon winter is enough to give any visitor the shivers. Average temperatures across December, January, and February sit around -50 degrees, and can drop even further on particular nights. A monument shaped like a concrete bull was erected right in the center of the village, on the very spot where the historic record is said to have been taken, a kind of frozen trophy the locals show off with quiet pride. A lot of people assume Oymyakon's extreme cold is simply down to how close it sits to the Arctic Circle, but the real explanation is far more interesting, and comes down to pure geography. The village sits in a valley, hemmed in on all sides by mountain ranges. This natural formation acts a bit like a giant bowl. Through winter, cold, dense air rolls down off the mountains and gets trapped inside the valley, unable to escape, since there's barely any wind circulation to shift it. The result is a constant buildup of freezing air sitting right over the village, day after day, week after week. On top of that, Oymyakon is a very long way from any ocean. That matters because being near a large body of water usually helps soften temperatures, a sort of reverse continentality effect. Since the village is stuck deep in the middle of the Asian continent with zero maritime influence to balance things out, temperatures plunge far more easily than in other Arctic regions closer to the coast, like parts of Canada or Scandinavia. Add to that the fact the village sits over 700 meters above sea level, and you've got the perfect recipe for extreme cold. High altitude, a closed-in valley between mountains, virtually no strong wind, and enormous distance from any ocean. It's essentially a geographical formula for turning Oymyakin into a natural deep freezer, on a real-world scale. Living somewhere temperatures regularly plunge to -50, 60, even 70 degrees demands a complete overhaul of everyday life. And that's exactly what the people of Oymyakin have been doing, generation after generation. Cars are never switched off. This is probably the detail outsiders find most surprising. Throughout winter, it's practically off-limits to leave a vehicle switched off for any length of time. If the engine cools down too much, the oil and other internal fluids can freeze solid, making it almost impossible to start the car again without specialized heating equipment. So it's common to see cars left running, parked, idling for hours outside homes and shops, even with nobody inside them. Water pipes freeze easily. Pipework left unused for even a few hours risks freezing solid. Because of this, plenty of homes in the village skip traditional internal plumbing altogether. Bathrooms, in a good number of cases, sit outside the main house in small separate structures, cold as it may seem. It sounds backwards, but it actually stops plumbing problems inside the home from turning into an even bigger headache. Food needs special storage. Since the ground stays frozen solid for most of the year, a phenomenon known as permafrost, growing fresh fruit, vegetables, and grains locally is basically impossible. The traditional diet leans heavily on reindeer and horse meat, plus fish from the Indigika River. There's a striking detail plenty of visitors mention. When a fish is pulled out of the water in the depths of winter, it can freeze completely solid within seconds, right there outdoors, before it's even brought inside. Ever thought about using the fridge to warm food up rather than cool it down? That's exactly what a lot of locals do. They use the fridge, paradoxically, to stop food from freezing solid indoors, since the appliance's internal temperature is actually milder than the freezing air outside. Heavy, traditional clothing. Winter wear in Oymyakin is built for the extreme. Many locals still wear animal skin clothing, reindeer, sheep, and other cold-adapted animals, following traditions passed down through generations of Siberian indigenous peoples. Being caught outdoors without proper protection can turn deadly within minutes. According to locals and visitors alike, an unprotected person faces serious health risks after just 1 minute exposed to the extreme cold on a typical winter's day. School rules that sound mad, but make sense. Pretty much anywhere else in the world, a light dusting of snow is enough to shut the schools for the day. In Oymyakin, reality looks completely different, and, oddly enough, it's also a matter of safety. According to locals and reporting on the region, the youngest kids, generally under 11, only stay home once the temperature drops past certain extreme thresholds. Older students, meanwhile, tend to have class even in conditions that would be treated as a full-blown climate emergency just about anywhere else on Earth. Classes are only genuinely cancelled once the cold hits levels considered dangerous even by local standards. Why does it work this way? Because if schools shut every time the temperature dropped below zero, which, in practice, would be most of the year, kids would simply never get an education. Extreme cold isn't the exception here, it's the rule. So the community has learned to set its own safety thresholds, wildly different from what any other place on the planet would use. Culture, tradition, and the Lord of Cold. Despite all the hardship, life in Oymyakin isn't just about survival. There's a rich culture here, particularly among the Yakut people, the region's predominant ethnic group, who've spent centuries learning to turn extreme cold into part of their own identity. One of the year's biggest events is the so-called Pole of Cold Festival, held at the tail end of winter. During the celebration, locals pay tribute to Chiskan, a kind of Lord of Cold from local folklore, portrayed as an imposing figure who embodies the relentless force of the Siberian winter. It's a way of celebrating, not just enduring, what makes this region so one of a kind. Back in the 1920s and 1930s, the Oymyakin Valley also served as a stopover point for herders bringing their reindeer to drink from the area's natural thermal springs, a fascinating detail, given there are springs that resist freezing even amid such brutal cold. That's actually where the village's name comes from. Oimayakan roughly translates to water that doesn't freeze. Tourism at the frozen edge of the world. It might sound mad, but Oimayakan does welcome visitors each year, albeit in small numbers, usually just a few dozen of the more adventurous travelers per season. Anyone game enough to make the trek out to this remote Siberian corner typically walks away with a special certificate confirming they survived the coldest permanently inhabited place on the planet. Not a bad souvenir for anyone chasing off the beaten-track destinations. The scenery, hostile as it is, has an undeniable beauty. Forests of pine and larch coated in ice, Siberian horses with their thick coats, a breed specifically adapted to this extreme climate, grazing in the snow, and a near-total silence that only deep winter can deliver. For lovers of remote destinations, secret islands, and mysterious places, Oimayakan offers exactly that kind of experience. A plunge into a world completely removed from everyday urban life, where nature still calls the shots. Worth noting, of course, that this isn't a trip for just anyone. Extreme tourism specialists recommend careful planning, proper thermal gear and, ideally, a local guide who knows the area well. After all, this is an environment where a small mistake in preparation can turn dangerous fast. The contrast, when summer arrives. One of the most surprising things about Oimayakan is the sheer contrast between the seasons. After months upon months of near-constant darkness, with only around 3 hours of daylight a day at the height of winter, the Siberian summer rolls in, and everything flips. During the warmer months, daylight can stretch to as much as 21 hours, and temperatures climb to a startling degree, easily hitting the low 30s Celsius. Yes, the same place that drops to nearly -70 in winter can have beach-worthy heat in summer. It's one of the most extreme climate contrasts anywhere on the planet, all within the same small patch of land. That contrast, actually, has become even more striking in recent years. In one recent summer, Oimayakan recorded its highest ever temperature, topping 32 degrees positive, a heat record set in the very village nicknamed the coldest in the world. The event, tied to wildfires burning across the Yakutia region, caught the attention of scientists worldwide, who point to this shift as a reflection of broader climate patterns being observed globally, even though a single isolated record isn't, on its own, definitive proof of a long-term trend. Oimayakan might be the poster child for extreme inhabited cold, but it's not alone in the running. Other remote spots around the globe wage their own private battles against the thermometer. Yakutsk, the regional capital of Siberia, is considered the coldest city, of any significant size, on Earth, and serves as the main gateway for anyone heading on to Oimayakan. Verkhoyansk, another Yakutia village, has historically gone head-to-head with Oimayakan for the title of Pole of Cold in the Northern Hemisphere, with extremely low readings recorded over decades. Delyankir, also in Siberia, has recorded temperatures close to -61 degrees in recent years, reinforcing that this whole stretch of inland Russia functions as one continuous frozen zone. Eureka, in Canada, is a research base on Ellesmere Island, well north of the 80th parallel. While it doesn't have a permanent population in the same way Oimayakan does, it's known for recording the lowest winter temperatures among coastal weather stations anywhere around the Arctic. None of these places, though, matches Oimayakan's exact combination: a permanent community, hundreds of residents, functioning schools, living cultural traditions, and a historic record of nearly -71 degrees. It's that mix of human endurance and geographical extremity that makes this Siberian village practically one of a kind. What Oimayakan teaches us about resilience. At the end of the day, Oimayakan's story is about far more than numbers on a thermometer. It's the story of a community that chose not to abandon its land, even in the face of one of the harshest environments nature can throw at people. While most of the world chases thermal comfort and flees the cold at every opportunity, the people of this Siberian village have spent generations building an entire way of life around the ice, from food to clothing, from customs to celebrations, from house design to school rules. It's places like this that keep fueling the curiosity of anyone who loves exploring the most remote, mysterious corners of the planet, not just for the frozen scenery and jaw-dropping temperatures, but above all for the people. Because in the end, the real story behind the coldest place on Earth isn't really about the cold at all. It's about humanity's remarkable capacity to adapt, endure, and somehow find beauty even in the harshest environment the planet is capable of producing. For anyone dreaming of exploring destinations well off the usual tourist trail, Oymyakin stands as a quiet, icy invitation, a reminder that there are still places on the map capable of surprising even the most